Hello friends, I am back again with another video on very important income tax topic which deals with deduction of tax at source and collection of tax and source in relation to sale and purchase of goods. So let's begin with the topic. Starting with section 206C subsection 1H, it basically states that every seller receiving more than rupees 50 lakh from any buyer except in case of an export or in case of a goods covered under subsection 1, subsection 1F or subsection 1G of section 206C. What are these sections? These basically relate to tendu leaves, liquor for human consumption, scraps, motor vehicle, remittance under liberalized remittance scheme, tour package, etc., in which a separate TCS regime has been prescribed under these sections. So they are out of the preview of section 206 subsection 1H. So it goes on to say that TCS shall be collected at the rate of 0.1% or 1% in case PAN of buyer is not there. So you have to collect TCS at the rate of 1%. In case your sales consideration is more than rupees 50 lakh. So here sales consideration means amount received, not the amount of sales exclusive of any taxes, but total amount received inclusive of all taxes, all levies or any out of pocket expenses, transportation, etc. if you are charging, inclusive of that. However, this section also states that this section will not be applicable in case any TDS provision has been prescribed for that transaction and TDS has actually been deducted on that transaction. So if TDS is applicable, then this subsection 1H will not be applicable. So it further goes on to tell you who is a buyer and who is a seller. So buyer, this section defines that buyer is any person who purchases any goods, but still you have to wait. There are certain exceptions in buyer also, like central government has been kept out of it, state government, embassies, high commissions, consulates, trade representation of foreign states and local authorities. So they have been kept out of the definition of buyer. So in case of any sale is being made to them, there will not be any TCS collected from them. Then who is the seller? This is also very important to keep in mind. Even though everybody is a seller, but still an exception has been carved out for collection of TCS. A particular category of seller has been made liable. So who is a seller? Seller whose sales, gross received or turnover exceeds rupees 10 crore during the financial year immediately preceding the financial year in which such sum is to be collected. So if I am talking about financial year 2021-22, so in that case I need to check the turnover of financial year 2020-21 in relation to that seller. However, still there is a provision of some exemption. This section states that anybody whom central government notifies shall be out of the preview of definition of seller. Before moving further, I would like to emphasize some finer points. अगर आपकी सेल्स 10 करोड़ से कम है पिछले साल में, तो उस केस में ये सेक्शन आपको एप्लीकेबल नहीं होगा. सेकेंडली, दिस इज अ रिसिप्ट बेस्ड टैक्स. सपोज आपको एडवांस रिसीट मिल गया, आपने सेल नहीं करी, उस केस में भी एप्लीकेबल होगा. आपको टैक्स मिला के पैसे मिले हैं, उस केस में भी एप्लीकेबल होगा. यू डोंट हैव टू कंफ्यूज दिस विद supply of goods. Further, this provision is not applicable to payment of consideration received in relation to supply of services. So let's be very clear, this section, even section 194Q also, they are clearly dealing with supply of goods. They are not dealing with supply of services. Further, as I also discussed, there will be no adjustment on account of debit note, credit note, GST, freight, etc. Everything all inclusive will be applicable. Even if some goods are returned, then also this has to be considered on gross value, not net value. Further, as is the case with other TDS or TCS, this has to be deposited within 7 days of next month. Up till now we have discussed section 206C 1H. Now there is a corresponding section in TDS 194Q which deals with purchase. So 206C 1H dealt with sales and this deals with purchase, and we will also be dealing with conflict within these two sections in case if at all there is any conflict. So अगर हम देखें section 194Q is also made on a similar line based on section 20C subsection 1H. Here also it says any buyer paying any sum to a resident for any purchases exceeding rupees 50 lakh in any previous year. तो अगर आपने 50 लाख से ऊपर परचेज करी है तो TDS एप्लीकेबल होगा. अगेन वो परचेज इज ऑल इंक्लूसिव ऑफ GST and all other incidental expenses. और ये काटना कब है? ये आपको काटना है at the time of payment और at the time of credit. TCS कब लेना था आपको? At the time of receipt of money. और ये आपको at the time of payment और at the time of credit. Even if you are crediting that amount to any suspense account, then also this provision of section 194Q will be applicable. So what is the rate of TDS rate of TDS is 0.1% of the transaction amount. However, there is one section which we will also discuss very briefly in this presentation only, section 206AA, which says in case PAN is not provided, the TDS will be deducted at the rate of 5%. Just for a quick comparison, the same provision was there in subsection 1H as well. There it was 1%. However, there is a corresponding section 206CC which also mandates TCS to be collected at the rate of 5% in case PAN is not provided. So in that case also, that 5% has been toned down in section 206C subsection 1H at 1%. Whereas in section 194Q, it's 5%. So this was just for a quick comparison so that no confusion is there. Then again, this section also goes on to define buyer. Seller has not been defined in this. Again, it states that buyer is a person who is having a sales turnover exceeding rupees 10 crore during the financial year immediately preceding the financial year in which the transaction is being carried out. Exception is provided to anybody who is exempted by central government. However, it goes on to say that the provision of this section shall not apply to any transaction on which TDS has been deducted under any other provision of income tax or TCS is collected. However, in case the transaction is covered under section 206C subsection 1H, in that case, section 194Q will be applicable. So here you have a hint that section 194Q has a superiority over section 206C subsection 1H. So we'll discuss it in coming few slides also. These are the section I was talking about. There are two sections in Income Tax Act, section 206CC and section 206AA. CC deals with TCS and AA deals with furnishing of PAN in case of a TDS. So both cover the same area, but one is with TCS, another is with TDS. So basically, in case PAN is not provided either by the buyer or by the seller, tax will be deducted at the rate twice which has been specified in the relevant provision or at twice the rate or rates in force. Mind you, this second point is applicable only in case of TDS. In TCS, this point is not applicable. So that's why I have also highlighted this point. Or third one, at the rate of 5% or 20%. So 20% rate is there in case of a TDS provision, in case PAN is not provided and TDS is required. So आपकी जो भी liability होगी TDS की वो 20% पे discharge होगी. Whereas in case of a TCS, if PAN is not there, your liability will be discharged at the rate of 5%. So out of these two or three conditions, whichever is the higher rate, the TDS or TCS shall be deducted on that. And PAN has to be communicated on each and every communication between buyer and seller on their stationery and so on and so forth. Now I will come on to another two sections, section 206CA and section 206AB, which also deals with same subject matter. 206CCA deals with TCS and 206AB deals with TDS. They both deal with non-filer of ITRs. So basically it says that if at all TDS is required to be deducted or TCS is required to be collected from any person, then if that person has not filed his income tax return for last 2 years, then in that case the TDS will be deducted at higher rates or TCS will be collected at higher rates. And what are those higher rates? Twice at the rate specified in relevant section or at the rate of 5%. Now this section also specifies who is that specified person with respect to which this section will be applicable. So that specified person has been defined under this section as a person who has not filed his last 2 years return, whose due date of filing income tax return under section 139 subsection 1 has elapsed, and that person has TDS or TCS both included. Total of TDS and TCS is more than 50,000 during each of those years. So in that case, TDS or TCS shall be collected or deducted at higher rates as discussed just now. However, this section also specifies in case there is a conflict between section 206CCA or 206CC and with respect to TDS 206AB and 206AA. So non-filer of return versus person who are not mentioning their PAN or providing their PAN. So in case of a conflict between these two sections, so you will have to individually find out what would be the applicable tax rate in under these two sections separately, and higher of that TDS rate shall be applicable. Let us take example with relation to 194Q and 206C subsection 1H as to which section will prevail based on transaction. In the first example, we are taking sales of 8 crore, seller's turnover is 8 crore, buyer's turnover is 14 crore. So buyer turnover is more than 10 crore and seller turnover is less than 10 crore. So seller is not required to collect any tax because his turnover is less, but buyer's turnover is more, he is required to deduct tax. So let us take the example, if the purchase transaction is 55 lakh, so how much will be the TDS or TCS? As I said, TCS will not be applicable, but TDS will be 0.1% of 5 lakh, which is over and above 50 lakh. Now moving on to second example, here we are taking seller's turnover more than 10 crore and buyer's turnover is less than 10 crore. So since seller turnover is more than 10 crore, TCS will be applicable. However, buyer's turnover is less than 10 crore. So TDS will not be applicable. So who will deduct TDS or TCS? 194Q will not be applicable. Whereas in case of section 206 subsection 1H, TCS will be applicable at the rate 0.1% on 5 lakh over and above 50 lakh, because section 206 1H says that in case TDS is applicable on that section, then the section of TCS will not be applicable. But since TDS is not applicable, so TCS can be collected on this matter. Now coming to again next example, here both the turnover are more than 10 crore. So buyer will also want to deduct TDS, seller would also want to collect TCS. So on the same transaction, how could this be possible that TDS and TCS both are being collected? So here comes the exception in play specified in section 206 subsection 1H, which says that if TDS provision is applicable, in that case TCS provision will not be applicable. So here in this case TDS will be deducted, no TCS shall be collected. So TDS will be at the rate of 0.1% of 5 lakh, that is over and above 50 lakh rupees. This of course I have assumed the PAN is there, otherwise the rate of TDS or TCS would have changed, either 1% or 5% depending upon the section applicable. Now moving further, based on our discussion, let's have a very quick comparison between these two sections. First, who will deduct? Section 194 is there at one hand and 206C subsection 1H is there at another hand. So in 194 it's the buyer, 1H there is a seller. Again talking about threshold limit in both the cases remains the same, 10 crore in the previous year immediately preceding the current previous year. Applicability, 194Q is applicable with effect from 1st July 2021 and section 206 subsection 1H is applicable from the last year 1st of October 2020. When the amount is to be deducted, in case of a TDS at the time of payment or at the time of credit, whichever is earlier, and in case of a TCS you need to collect at the time of receipt, not at the time of sales. Suppose you have made the sales before, but receipts, whenever the receipts are coming, you need to collect that amount at that. What are the rates? Rates again we have discussed, 0.1% in each case. In case no PAN, 5% in TDS case and 1% in case of a TCS case. To whom this provision are not applicable? In case of section 194, it is not applicable where other TDS provisions are applicable or where other transaction of TCS are applicable except section 206C subsection 1H. And in case of a TCS, again it is not applicable where TDS or TCS provision are already applicable, as we have discussed. Now moving further, which section will prevail? Section 194Q will prevail in case there is any conflict between these two sections. However, if section 194 is not applicable, in that case section 206 is to be applied. In case of a section 194Q, no exclusions have yet been notified by the government. However, in case of a TCS section, there are certain exclusions which have been notified by the government, which is it will not be applicable in case of an importer of goods, central or state government, local authority, embassy, high commission, consulate, trade association, etc. as already discussed. Again, form will be 26Q in case of a TDS and 27EQ in case of a TCS. TDS certificate will be issued in form 16A and 27D will be there for TCS certificate. In case there is a supply of capital goods or purchase of capital goods, yes, both the sections will be applicable. It relates to goods. It doesn't matter whether they are capital goods or not. Before we conclude, I have few points specifically for the emphasis sake I want to discuss before ending this presentation. Whether GST will be included or not for deduction of TDS. Yes, GST will be included. I have already discussed this point in detail in my presentation. However, recognition of turnover shall be exclusive of GST. That should be recognized in normal parlance. Section 40A subsection IA, whether that will be applicable in case you purchase something and don't deduct TDS under section 194Q. Yes, of course, this section will be applicable and 30% of total purchase amount shall be disallowed in case you do not deduct tax as per the provision of this section. One very important question: how would you find out about whether that person has filed ITR or their TDS or TCS which has been deducted on their PAN is more than 50,000 or not during each of the previous year? This is a very difficult question to answer. Either you have to take your buyer or seller into confidence and ask for this information along with proof from them, or hopefully the income tax department might come with some utility or some information portal wherein you can get this type of information, maybe in form of yes or no, whether TDS or TCS is required in case of that particular buyer or seller with a particular PAN or not. However, in case PAN is not provided, it's very simple. You can take it as 5% or 1%, whatever the case. So again, buyer or seller will have to substantiate whether I need to provide any document or not to reduce my TDS or TCS liability. In case of a sale of any immovable property, whether TDS or TCS shall be applicable or not. Just to clarify this point, this section is applicable for sale or purchase of goods. If you go by the definition given under Sale of Goods Act, immovable property has not been considered as a goods, so this section shall not be applicable. However, any other provision in relation to immovable property requiring TDS, they shall be applicable. Before I conclude, a very important and last point: what will happen to transactions which are sale or purchase transaction done in first quarter of financial year 21-22 in relation to section 194Q, because section 194Q is being made applicable from 1st July 2021. So you see, there is a limit of rupees 50 lakh of transaction during the current year in order to evaluate whether the TDS has to be collected or not. So that 50 lakh transaction limit is to be reckoned not from 1st July 2021. That limit has to be reckoned from 1st of April 2021. If you have exhausted that 50 lakh limit, no issues. Over and above that limit, whatever amount you are purchasing, you are required to deduct TDS. I'll give you a couple of examples over this point. Let's take first example. Let us assume you have made purchase during the first quarter from a party A and the purchase amount is 75 lakh. You have already exceeded 50 lakh, but there was no such provision to deduct tax, so hence you did not deduct any TDS on that 75 lakh. Now post 1st July, whatever purchase you are going to make, since you have already exceeded 50 lakh, you are required to deduct TDS right from the first rupee of transaction. Let us take a second example. You have made purchases from party A for 35 lakh. Now you have again made certain purchases from that party, let's say for 20 lakh. So here your turnover has exceeded 35 plus 20, 55. So on that 5 lakh, over and above that 50 lakh, you are required to deduct TDS. Further, last one more thing, in case you have made any advance also under section 194Q, then also you are required to make deduction of TDS irrespective of whether that purchase has been received or not. With these words, friends, I conclude my presentation. I hope I was able to add some value addition to your already existing sea of knowledge. In case you need to ask any specific question in relation to your trade or industry, kindly feel free to reach out to me on the coordinates mentioned on this screen. I would be eagerly waiting for your questions, observation, and any kind of constructive criticism. This is CA Hemant Gupta signing off. Thank you for watching the video.